Okay, I was here really. Why did I play If I Were a Toy? I'm glad half my class knows.
It's part of imperative
Subjunctive, good girl. Because what do we normally, when we learnt about subjunctive before, what songs did we compare last time? And you're, well, I don't even know who that is, which obviously broke my heart. Beyonce, and her song was If I Were a Boy, I Would. And then the alternative one that isn't subjunctive but kind of sounds like it might be is Justin Bieber, and that was If I Was Your Boyfriend, wasn't it? Which is completely wrong, not even grammatically correct. But we then recognised the song back to the Smiths advert, didn't we? If I were a toy, you could be anything you want, and that is perfect for subjunctive and also something that you now all know about. This is a recap on subjunctive. You won't have these slides at home because there's nothing for you to do with these slides, just to work through them. You might want to have a piece of paper or your whiteboard in front of you, or even your success criteria, because the whole point of learning about subjunctive is that we need to include it in your writing. Can you remember, was it yesterday, where we looked at formal language? And part of looking at that formal language, don't worry about it now, just use your whiteboard, okay? Part of that formal language was using the subjunctive. Yeah? It is imperative. That's another example of what? Formal language. Thank you. Now we talk about synonyms. It is really important that the subjunctive be used. It's also up-levelling that word. It's using a synonym, isn't it? Making it more formal. If I were you, I'd have a look at this. Oh, we are kind of working. Huh? You know what the subjunctive is. I don't need her. Let's go through these all out. Have a look at these sentences. Can you see anything unusual about the verbs? What is a verb? Doing or feeling word. Okay. Okay. If John were to get an A on his test, I would be very surprised. If John were to get an A on his test, I would be very surprised. What verb do they think they want you to look at? Because there's more than one verb in there, isn't there? What verb do you think they're trying to get you to look at? It's got a special name, and we looked at it last time when we did something else. Passive? It's not on there. Can you think? Do you know? Have a go.
Is it very?
Nope. Good try though. There is kind of a clue on how they're written. Do you think that's one that stands out in that sentence? This is one of the hardest verbs. Everyone finds this hard because they don't think of it as a verb.
Were.
It's were. What is were related to in terms of verbs? Do you remember we talked about auxiliary verbs last week, and the auxiliary verb to be? Yeah? Were is related to that, isn't it? To be is a state. It's that you are to be. Yeah? So were is linked to that, and it's what we also use when we talk about passive. Remember we put that were before we did the many towns and cities in England were bombed by German planes. German planes bombed many cities. Can you see that were is important there? And it's the same for subjunctive, and this is why you get subjunctive and passive muddled up sometimes. Okay? It's to do with that auxiliary verb and that were, but there's two different things. There's no by zombies on here or anything, is there? If John were to get... Now, do you think you normally talk about that? If John were to get an A on his test, I'd be very surprised. Do you think you talk like that normally? No. What about, were I a little bit taller? This is me. I would be able to reach the shelf. Were I a little bit... Do you hear me say that quite often? In that way? Do I say, were I a little bit taller, I'd be able to reach the shelf? Not normally, do I? I would run if I were younger. I would run if I were being chased by a dinosaur. That's the only time I run. if I were him, I'd try a lot harder at school. No. We don't talk like that, do we? Which is why it's that formal way of talking. It's like guess where the button is, isn't it? It's like pin the tail on the donkey, but with buttons on the board. What we would normally say was, if John got an A on his test, I'd be very surprised. If I was a little bit taller, I'd be able to reach the shelf. I would run if I was younger. If I was him, I would try a lot harder at school. Can you see that change? That were and that was. Yeah? But you can't just put were in, or even his place of got. If John were an A on his test, I would be very surprised. You can't just replace it. You actually need to reorder the words in the sentence. The subjunctive verb form can be used to show that we don't think the situation is really possible. Japanese isn't going to be taught here. I'm not going to cool down anytime soon. Not always though, because we are going to be able to use this in our writing. The subjunctive verb form structure is really quite simple. I'm not convinced by this. It's simple. It's not simple. Why is it not simple?
Because sometimes you can't really use it in a sentence, and you have to think and keep on saying it.
Yes, because it's not the way we naturally talk. So it is simple in terms of how you do it. It's not simple in terms of you've actually got to, like you say, rethink your sentence. Like with the passive, you've got to rethink your sentence to be able to make it into the subjunctive. Make sense? For all verbs except the past of be, you use the same as the infinitive basic form. Okay. Have you all just gone, I've got no idea what infinitive basic form is? Don't worry about it. That kind of, you just do it naturally. So if I were, you were, he, she, it were, we were, you were, they were. Got two new words. I be, you be, he, she, it be, we be, you be, they be. I work. All other verbs, past and present. I think it makes more sense when we actually start doing it, doesn't it? Actually, it's even easier because the subjunctive doesn't change according to the person. It didn't, did it? So it didn't matter. When you do foreign languages, you learn I, you, he, she, don't you? When you learn the different, when you're doing French, it changes, doesn't it? The ending of the word. I did Latin when I first started at secondary school. And I remember I love in Latin, amo, amassa, mat, amam, smartus, amant. Because I love, you love, he, she, it loves, we love, they love. Just an order. Are you dead impressed that I learnt Latin? That's the only thing I can remember. But it doesn't change, does it? The word stays the same. The be stays the same. The work stays the same. It doesn't matter who the person is you're talking about. So it doesn't matter if you're in first person or third person. So think about when you write like a narrative, a story. And you might write it in the first person, mightn't you? Or you're writing like we're writing a formal piece of non-fiction, which is going to be in the third person. So it's not going to change, which is what makes it simpler. I'm not convinced they're saying it's easy. You don't always notice this because it sometimes sounds like the normal verb. The subjunctive verb form isn't common in everyday British speech, however it is often used after formal verbs such as require, demand, suggest and propose. And when I looked at this, I thought actually we can get these into our World War II writing. So I was like, are we going to be able to get them into our explanation text? Because that's why we're doing it, isn't it? To get it into our explanation text. Do you think we could get this into our explanation text about World War II and about the D-Day landings? I think we can. I think we can. Let's have a look. Require. Require could be a word we use, couldn't it? Demand. What did they require? They required a lot of work, a lot of planning, a lot of practice. They also required the weather conditions to be perfect, didn't they? So the word require feels like we can use it within our writing. Demand. I'm not sure about demand. Might be able to get demand in there. Suggest or propose. Well, surely they did propose things. They proposed their plans. They suggested plans, didn't they? So these are words that we are going to, these are verbs, formal verbs that we are going to be able to use in our writing. The governors proposed that Class 5 learn maths all day. The British government proposed that the Allies all work together. Yeah? You could easily change that sentence to make it fit for us, couldn't you? The Queen demands that all children be taught to curtsy. Churchill demands that, what? What did he demand? That all British troops
Must
be
follow
taught, what can they be taught to? Or what can they do? We need the be there, don't we? Churchill demands that all British troops be deployed for the D-Day landings, be used for the D-Day landings. Yeah? Because he did, didn't he? He wanted all of them. Churchill demands that...
Everyone must follow the plans.
Where we're going to get the B in.
Oh.
Demands that all the Allies
Must
be
loyal.
loyal, yeah.
It could be must be.
Yeah, does that would work?
Yeah.
Churchill demands that all Allies must be what? Loyal?
Yeah.
You could just do be, you wouldn't need must. Just be loyal. Can you see how it's going to take some work? These aren't naturally going to fit in. That's the whole point of learning them, isn't it? Because obviously when you're grown up, you'll know what the subjunctive is. You'll be able to teach your grown up. Mrs. Smith requires that James Brown go to her office now. I wouldn't use go, I'd use proceed. Churchill requires that Operation Overlord proceeds at dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah? Might I suggest that your son wait outside until we have finished our chat? Oh, that sounds like that child's in trouble, doesn't it? Do you think that kind of one we will use? Do you think there's much suggesting in what you're going to be writing about? Think what your end task is. Your end task is writing about why the D-Day landings were successful, or you might be writing about just the D-Day landings. So I don't think a question type suggestion is going to be very useful. You're going to be much more talking about the facts, what did actually happen, aren't you, rather than suggesting. You can't suggest something happens in it because it's already happened, it's already been and gone. So that one isn't something that I would try to rearrange for you to use in your work. The subjunctive verb form is also used after formal expressions such as it is desirable, necessary, vital, essential. Look at those words. I'm not sure about desirable, but you could talk about the weather. It is desirable that we proceed on a full moon. Yeah? Or it is desirable that we proceed when the moon is full and the tide is in our favour. Necessary? Were things necessary? Things were necessary for the plan to work, weren't they? And the same with vital. Vital is a really good word, isn't it? It means so important, and essential is a very similar word as well. We come across those words quite a lot in World War II. It is desirable that the whole class be here early for the trip. It is desirable that the moon is full. Oh, I can't know if I get be in there. What could I do? It is desirable that the troops be here, be loaded in plenty of time for the trip. Not trip. That sounds like it's gone on a fun day out, doesn't it? It really wasn't a fun day out. But it is desirable that all the troops be ready, come on, help me. It's Friday. It's Monday at home, but it's Friday at school.
Instead of trip, you could use journey.
Journey, yeah. Could use journey instead of trip. That trip definitely needs up levelling, doesn't it? It does sound like they're going to have a day out to Alton Towers, which it really wasn't. It is necessary that you eat all your chocolate right now. I mean, we're not going to. Is it necessary that you eat all your chocolate now? And the answer is obviously going to be yes. I mean, is that even a discussion? What could be used? It is necessary that.
It is necessary that be the troops follow Owen at
Yeah. It is necessary that all troops are adequately prepared for the operation. that all the troops be adequately, you get B in there, you've got B, didn't you? It is necessary that all the troops be prepared, be fully prepared for the operation. Can you see this, how it's going to fit into your writing? I think when we look at the subjunctive when we first do it, it's that if I were, but subjunctive is more than if I were, isn't it? In our books we've got a subjunctive thing about the different sentence structures, but don't always stick to if I were, because you're not writing about you. You're not writing in the first person, are you, for your explanation text, so you can't use the phrase if I were. So we need to think of a more sophisticated way of doing it. I think, oh gosh, there's more plenary. Subjunctive form, what have we learnt today? Subjunctive form is used in formal language, we know that. It can be used to give advice or talk about unreal situation. We're actually talking about a real situation. The subjunctive form follows certain verbs or expressions. If I were you though, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Don't stress about it, we'll get it in there. Even if it's something we do when we edit, we'll get it in there. So we will have some editing sessions. The end, get it on your success criteria, think about how you're going to use it in your writing. You might want to put it on the end column of your plan because you think, oh, that's going to go really well in that paragraph. And the main session is starting writing from your plan. Off you go.